Okay, connecting here. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for making time to join this event today on behalf of our friends at Bentham Science. My name is Scott, coming to you here from very rainy Tokyo, Japan. And we really appreciate you making the time to attend our event today. The topic is journal selection and submission. This is a very common pain point for researchers all around the world. I'm sure not only our colleagues there in South Africa, but absolutely everywhere. And who better to walk us through this important selection process than our beloved colleague, Dr. Gareth Dyke. Gareth, how are things?
Good. How are you doing? Everything okay? Nice to see everybody joining us for this event. Let us know where you're from, the university that you're joining us from. That would be great. Let us know a little bit more information about yourself in the chat. How are you doing today, Scott? Everything going well?
Fantastic. It's a beautiful, chilly, rainy day here in Tokyo. I feel like I'm back home in Vancouver in the rainforest.
Nice. Cool. And here it's sunny and bright and a lovely day. Welcome everybody. Do let us know where you're from. Don't be shy. Get involved, jump into the chat. Let us know yeah, where you're from, which university, maybe a little bit about your research area. That would also be fantastic for us to know about so that we can tailor this event and say a few things about your own research. Fantastic.
Fantastic. We've got some guests joining us from NWU. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for saying hello in the chat there. And great to know the kind of research you're working on. Our guest here is working on work well-being. Oh, that's an important topic. Fantastic. Great, great. Yeah, feel free to say hello in the chat and feel free to network together. We love to introduce researchers in these events, and hopefully you can make a new connection and potentially a new collaborator. Uh,
Fantastic.
ge-
Fantastic. I see
yeah, it's
two
great, isn't
two
it?
universities so far, so let us know. NWU, Northwest University. Yeah, fantastic. Great to see everybody. And thanks very much to Bentham Science and the team for supporting this event today.
Absolutely. And just a bit of housekeeping. You're very welcome to ask questions. You can stick them into the Q&A box, or if that isn't working for you, you can always type them into the chat. And we usually aggregate all of the questions for Gareth, and then Gareth will kindly share his expertise at the end of the event today or towards the end of the event. So feel free to share your questions anytime. If we don't answer them immediately, it's just because we're going to tabulate them towards the end. And we will be sharing a full video recording that you can review anytime. You can share with your colleagues. There'll just be a simple password. So if you have any colleagues who could not attend the event today, feel free to share the event details. We'll send you the full recording about 24 hours after this event ends. So feel free to review as much as you like and share with anyone else.
Absolutely great. Let's say a few things about Bentham Science as we get started in our event today. Scott, like Bentham is the supporter of this webinar. And if you're looking for a venue for your next research paper, Bentham Science could be a great choice.
Absolutely. And one of the strong points of Bentham Science is its unique peer review system. It's uniquely robust, scientifically robust, but also it's very fair and impartial because of the blinding system that Bentham uses, which is quite unique, isn't it, Gareth?
Absolutely, absolutely. Not a lot of publishers do this, but Bentham Science, if you send a paper to one of Bentham's journals, the editor managing the journal will not be involved in peer review choice, finding the reviewers, and your paper will be reviewed in a completely blinded fashion. So the reviewers won't know your identity, and vice versa. And many researchers around the world find that this is actually a very good way to get their work assessed and reviewed for publication. Bentham, if you don't know, more than 160 online and print journals, around 126 that are hybrid, 40 open access, as well as 1,300 or more online and print books. So do have a look at Bentham Science if you're looking for a venue for your next research paper, right, Scott?
That's right. If you are a librarian joining us today, then feel free to click on scan the QR code. That will take you to a page where you can fill in a very simple form and you can get free access for your institution's library for 3 months. And the Bentham team will set you up. There's no obligation whatsoever. So if you don't already have a trial, there's nothing to lose. Just scan the QR code. And we also have a campaign going where the APC charges have been levied for researchers in South Africa. So feel free to reach out to the Bentham team if you're interested in publishing your work. This is the perfect time to do that.
We have several colleagues from our friends in South Africa, the agents that we work with in South Africa. So maybe those colleagues will put their contact information also into the chat if you have any follow-up questions about Bentham content. As Scott was saying, if you like to get a free trial of the Bentham content for your institution, we'll show you this QR code again at the end of our event. Maybe you can scan it, maybe send it to a librarian within your institution, or indeed perhaps you have a friend at another university who'd be interested in getting their hands on this QR code to get access to all of the fantastic Bentham content. And with all of that being said, we'll get started with our event today. Journal selection, right, Scott? As you were saying a moment ago, this is really a key area, a key issue that many researchers ask us about in our events around the world.
Absolutely. And I see that our colleagues, Rentia and Nadia, have just shared their contact details. Thank you very much to both of you. So anyone who's interested in the free trial or in the open access fee levy, please reach out to Nadia, Rentia, and team. They'd be delighted to hear from you if you're interested in submitting to a Bentham journal or in partaking in a trial. So thank you very much to all of you. And thanks everyone for joining. Over to you, Gareth. We'll get on to journal selection.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about two elements of journal selection in our event today. We're going to start off before writing your paper, like things to think about before you get going, before you begin writing your research article. And then we'll talk about before submitting your paper to a journal. But journal selection in the center there, because that is often the key stumbling block for researchers around the world getting their work published in leading international journals, finding a great journal. And as Scott was saying a moment ago, like if you do wish to make a submission to one of the Bentham journals, that will be free of charge. So we have this waiver in place for all of our friends and colleagues in South Africa. You can send a paper to a Bentham journal. Once it gets accepted, after peer review, of course, it can then be published full open access with no charge. So do take advantage of that. At the moment, this is available to you. Do get in touch with our colleagues who've put their contact information in the chat if you'd like more information. Let's talk about journal selection though. Let's begin by thinking about issues that we may face as researchers before writing a research article in the context of journal selection. So this is really, really, really important. Journal selection, picking a great outlet for your next research article, finding the best possible journal for your research. Different institutions around the world have different requirements, but many researchers are looking for journals listed in Scopus, listed in Web of Science with good impact factors. We'll come back to that in a moment. But selecting a great journal, really important because this can speed up the publication of your research, helps to maximize the impact of your work. And also, as we'll talk about in this event a little bit later on, we will be showing you how you can use information that's available to you as a researcher to not get caught out by fake journals, to not get caught out by predatory journals that are just interested in taking your money and not giving you a great outlet for your research. So journal selection, super, super important. And it helps, of course, because we all want our research to stand out. So finding a great journal, a great outlet, a great place to publish that research, really, really important. About 2 million papers were published last year in STM journals around the world, about 2 million peer-reviewed research articles, and about 30,000 research papers are published every month just in the health and medical sciences. So how are you going to get your work to stand out? How are you going to do that? How are you going to get noticed as a researcher? Well, finding a good journal is that all-important first step to make sure that your work stands out from the crowd, gets noticed, gets cited, and gets picked up by other researchers, for example. So, with that in mind, we're going to do a quick poll. Scott's going to come back in just a moment and we're going to ask you this question. When is the best time to pick a journal for your paper, Scott?
This is a great question to ask researchers. I'll launch the poll here and we'll see what our guests think. I've changed the wording a little bit here. The question on the poll is, when do you typically select a journal for your paper? Is it before you start writing? Is it while you're writing your manuscript? Or is it after you finish writing your manuscript? When would you typically select a journal? That's our question for our guests today. Let's see what they think.
People do this in different ways. Like, give us your honest response to this, please. Like, do you write the paper and then pick a journal? Do you have a think about it while you're writing the paper? Or do you do it beforehand? Do you have a journal in mind before you begin writing your research paper? Very important question.
It is, and we realize that reality sometimes steps in and circumstances are not always perfect. So we're looking for what is the best answer. It's not the only correct answer, but maybe the best correct answer. Let's see what our guests think. I'm going to end the poll here. And let's take a look at the results. Okay, 66% of our guests say that they would normally choose a journal before writing, 24% while they're writing, and 10% after they finish writing. Gareth, in your opinion, when is the best optimal time to select a journal?
Well, as we're going to demonstrate, hopefully, in this event today, really to be most efficient and give your paper the best chance of eventual acceptance, as well as helping you with the writing process as a researcher, we would argue that the best time to do this is before you begin to write. Now, we realize that this is not often what researchers actually do, but have a think about this. See what you think as we go through the rest of our event today. Can we convince you that having a journal in mind before beginning to write your paper is actually the most efficient strategy as a researcher to get the most out of your research? So, yeah, the best time really is before you begin to write. That would make a lot of sense. The best time to select a journal is before you begin writing your paper. Why is that? We're going to talk about that in a moment. But having a journal in mind before you begin writing helps an awful lot with the writing and publishing process, because every journal is different. They all have different aims and scope, different authors, different readership. The kind of paper that you may end up putting together could be different depending upon the journal that you select. Will it be a full article? Will it be a letter, a rapid communication? And of course, picking a journal as a researcher for your article, for your output, for your research results is something that comes with experience. So, as you get more experienced, as you get better at writing and publishing papers, you get better also at picking, at selecting appropriate journals. But this is best done before you begin the writing process. You're going to know the journal aim and scope, the aims and scope of the journal that you've got in mind for your research. You're going to know about the readership, the disciplines, the topics that that journal covers, as well as the types of articles that normally get published in that particular journal. So you're going to know the guidelines of the journal, the procedures, the peer review process, as we talked about already in the context of Bentham Science. Different researchers have different expectations from peer review, as well as the formatting, the word limits, the copyright of that journal, which we're also going to come back to and talk about a little bit later on in our event today, as well as in addition to basic elements of the writing, such as what style is the journal going to use, even down to the level of the English that you might be expected to put into your research article. So this is great as a strategy for being successful as a researcher. We always recommend to everybody working in different universities around the world, pick a handful of great international researchers working in your area, leaders in your field. Have a look at their websites, have a look at their CVs. Where are they publishing their groundbreaking research, the journals that they're picking? You can then have a look at those journals for your own research. Having a journal in mind helps you a lot with the writing process. You're going to know what you need to put into the different sections, how much information goes into the introduction, into the methods, even how to put together figures and figure captions. So it saves a great deal of time having a journal in mind before you begin. So we always like to say, you've done your research, you've got your results, you've got that information ready to publish. Do have a think about the message. The message. What is the key takeaway from your particular piece of research? What do you want people reading your research to gain from that experience? What's the message? Who are the audience? So which journal are you going to select? That's the audience, the readership, the journal choice, message, audience, and structure, the structure of the research article. And of course, that comes from your journal choice because every journal's different. The structure, the elements that make up the paper that you're going to put together will be different depending on your target journal. So before beginning to write, have a think about your message, your audience, that's the target journal, and the structure of the writing itself. These are key elements to have in mind before beginning to write. And if you do this, if you do a piece of research, have some results that you think are publishable, you then think about your message, your audience, and the structure of the writing, you'll save yourself a great deal of time in the writing and publishing process. This is a great strategy. Do also have a think about whether you'd like to preprint your work on a preprint platform even before selecting a journal as well. And we're going to come back to that in a moment in this presentation. Also, when selecting a journal, when picking a journal, when choosing a journal for your next research article, in addition to looking at where key international researchers in your field are publishing their great work, also don't forget that you can reach out and talk to editors at different journals around the world prior to making your article submission. Talk to editors, write them what we call pre-submission inquiries, get in touch with them in advance of making your submission and ask them, hey, editor at The Lancet, hey, editor at BMJ, hey, editor at Nature, would you be interested in seeing a submission from my research team, from our research group? Would you be interested in this article for potential consideration in your journal? These are called pre-submission inquiries, and they really are a great idea as a researcher to get in touch with editors, reach out to editors before you go ahead and make your submission. It gives you that angle, gives you that chance to get ahead, gets a journal interested in your work before you go ahead and make the submission. We also want to remind you as well, of course, that academic impact, so the journal that you pick for your next research project, is only half the battle. There's also a lot of impact for you to think about in terms of research that comes from economic and societal angles, the benefits of your work, not just where you publish it, but what difference is your work going to make, let's say, to the lives of ordinary people. So research impact, thinking about that in the context of journals, is only half the story. So when we pick a journal, when we do a piece of research, we think also about maximizing the impact of that research, but we also think about the different kinds of research impact and how, as researchers, we can maximize the impact of our work. So do have a think about this as well. Academic impact is just one element. Also, the economic and societal benefits that your work has and will create. So when we're going there, we're thinking then about putting a research article together, choosing a journal for that piece of research. We have this checklist that we wanted to share with you at this point, how you can self-evaluate your research and think about where it could be published. So if you're not sure that a particular journal is appropriate for a piece of work that you've put together, you can always use this handy checklist to self-evaluate. How novel is your paper, your research within known contexts? How good are your methods, the study design, the data analysis, and so on? These will be evaluated by peer reviewers. The methods, this area of research is the one area that peer reviewers are going to zero in on and really have a good look at in the peer review process. Have you minimized bias? What are the real world implications of your study, its application, its influence? Is your study ethically compliant? Very, very, very important, and something that lots of authors don't really think about prior to writing and publishing. And also, is your writing, is your English highly readable and suitable for non-specialist readers? Something else that we are delighted to help with. If you'd like to get in touch with us at the end, we provide other training events, other webinars, for example, on English language writing skills for academic researchers. So do have a look at this checklist, ways to self-evaluate your research, ways to have a think about whether your journal that you're looking at for your paper might be an appropriate choice. And with that in mind, let's get Scott back involved. Let's have another poll about pre-submission inquiries, which I was just talking about a moment ago. Scott, how are we doing?
Doing great. And in fact, in real time, I was just chatting with a colleague here in the chat, and their colleague has a possible paper for that might align with one of the Bentham social science journals. So I recommended that maybe your colleague can send that journal editor a pre-submission inquiry and see if their work might align. So it's a very useful technique, these pre-submission inquiry emails. So let's do a very quick poll here. I'll launch the poll, and the question is, how many pre-submission inquiries can you send to journals at a time? Is it only one, up to three, or is it unlimited?
We didn't really mention this yet. So, let's see if you've been kind of paying attention in our event so far today. This is different, of course, to making a submission. These are pre-submission inquiries. How are we doing, Scott?
Doing great. And I think the name sometimes sounds a bit fancy. We call it a pre-submission inquiry. It's basically an email, isn't it? You're just reaching out to the editor and telling them a little bit about the work that you're doing and inquiring if they might be interested.
Hopefully there's
I think
no
we
hopefully there's no problems with the sound. Like I see some comments in the chat about the sound quality. Also about the slides, Scott. We're going to be sharing a recording of this event after the fact, right?
Absolutely. We'll be sharing the full video recording. We don't usually share the slides themselves. We do one better, and we share the full video that you can scan through. It's got the full transcript, it's got the chat, it's got everything there, and you can skip to the parts that you're most interested in, and you can review as many times as you like. And as we mentioned earlier, you can also share that with your colleagues at your institution or anywhere, and you can give them the link to the video, and they can access anytime as well. So we'll check the results of our poll here. And 52% of our guests said only one at a time, and 48% said it's unlimited. What's the correct answer, Gareth? How many of these can we send to editors?
It's unlimited. If you've got a piece of research you'd like to start the journal selection process, you can write as many emails as you like to journal editors asking them if they would be interested in seeing a submission from you on that particular topic. We even have a template. We'll share that with you as well. So you can use that template when you've got a piece of research. Let's say you have a list of 10 or 15 potential journals based on where you've seen other colleagues publishing their work, where you've published your work, where your supervisor has published his or her work in the past. You can then reach out to as many journal editors as you like, and maybe you'll get a positive response, which would be great. Then, of course, you're in the mind of the journal editor. You can then go ahead and make that submission, and hopefully your paper will progress in a smoother manner through to eventual publication. So pre-submission inquiries as a component of journal selection are super, super important and super, super useful. You can use them to speed up the process, write to editors as many as you like, help yourself to select a target journal effectively. If you've got the abstract, if you've got some elements of the paper, the title, perhaps the key takeaway. Remember, we talked about message audience and structure as elements to have in mind as you begin the writing process. You've got your message. Send that off to journal editors and ask them if they would be interested in receiving a submission from you. You then have a journal in mind. You can begin the writing process, and we'll give you that email template that you can use to help speed up that process as well. So this brings us to the end of the first part of our webinar event today, talking about journal selection and talking initially about what to do before writing your paper. Right, Scott? We're about to move on to the second part.
Absolutely. And I'm going to share a link to that pre-submission inquiry email template. I'll stick it in the chat, and I'll also send it out tomorrow with the email that's going out when we share the video and the certificates with you. So check your inbox tomorrow about 24 hours after the event, and we'll send you an email that's got the pre-submission inquiry template, which I'll also post a link to here, your certificate, and also the full video recording. So that'll be coming in your inbox tomorrow.
Fantastic, fantastic. And don't forget to have a look at Bentham journals. As we mentioned already, maybe we've already generated a new submission in this event today for our wonderful friends and colleagues at Bentham Science. Let's go on now and talk about journal selection and that part of the process before you make your article submission. So elements of journal selection prior to submission. Most researchers, and I'm sure that you will fall into this group if you're listening to this event today, are interested in journals with decent impact factors. They're interested in journals with good reputations, of course. They're interested in journals that have a decent reach within their own research field, within their own research area. And of course, this can vary greatly depending upon your own research area. So I'm sure you're thinking now about some of the journals that you would typically look at within your own research area. Researchers as well, though, are often very, very interested in publishing their work open access. And we talked about this in our first event with colleagues from South Africa. If you can cast your mind back to our earlier webinar, open access, the accessibility of your research article is absolutely key as well. So impact factor, reputation, reach within your own research area, as well as open access. And what we're looking at here really with journal selection, effective journal selection, is a marriage between your research and getting it out there, making sure that it gets noticed, making sure that you make as much impact as possible with your next research publication. So tends to kind of fit into this little diagram that we've got here on the slide. Researchers are looking for impact factor. They're looking for reach and readership, high reach, wide readership, and they're also very interested, we are very interested as researchers in seeing our work published as quickly as possible. So these are also important elements. Do have a look at some of the databases we're going to share with you in a moment. You should be able to get your hands on data specific to the journals that you're looking at for your research publications, impact factor, the reach, the readership, and the speed to publication. This is also very, very important, an element that we're going to come back to in a moment in terms of managing your publication, making sure that you talk to editors throughout the whole publication process and make sure that your paper doesn't get lost in the system so it comes out online as fast as possible after peer review, of course. Have a look at this, maybe aims and scopes, the readership, the article type, the length, the evidence level, the publication speed, the frequency, the impact factor, the indexing, the rank of the journal that you've chosen. Will it be print? Will it be online? Will it be open access? And what's the acceptance rate? These are all key factors that researchers look at, I'm sure you do as well, when deciding which journal to pick for your next paper. So have a look at these, which ones are most important to you. Maybe you'll give us that information in the chat or talk to us about this in the Q&A session at the end. Which element of journal selection is most important for you as a researcher. We've put a number of indicators here on this slide. If you're thinking about what impact factor is, what site score is, what impact per publication is, what's the eigenfactor, what's your H index, we put these on the slide so you can have a think about these different definitions. For most researchers, of course, impact factor, which is simply the number of citations that that journal has generated within the last 2 years, divided by the number of articles that that journal has published. That's how you calculate a journal impact factor. Your own H index, of course, that is a metric that tells you, if I've got an H index of 40 or 10, let's say, I have published at least 10 papers that themselves have been cited at least 10 times. So it's a measure that universities and funding agencies around the world use to assess researcher quality. So generally accepted that a higher H index indicates a more experienced, more highly cited researcher, for example. We get lots of questions about these journal indicators. Do have a look at this. Do listen back to this recording, or indeed ask us at the end if you have any questions about any of this information. So, different kinds of journals we talked about in our earlier event with colleagues from South Africa. Bentham, for example, publishes what we call traditional journals. So these are journals that are paywalled. They're accessible only to researchers who have a subscription, an institutional subscription. You don't have to pay to publish in a traditional journal. The content is sold back to universities and libraries, etc. So we've all experienced that. We try to access a research article in a traditional journal. Our institution perhaps doesn't have access. We have to go onto a site like Sci-Hub, not recommending that you use that, but it's out there. You can access lots of content that would normally be behind a paywall. We've all published in these journals. Some colleagues, though, cannot access our articles, traditional journals. On the other hand, fully gold open access journals, such as Bentham's hybrid journals, you're publishing in these journals for an article processing charge. You're paying the publisher a fee to convert your research article to full gold open access. This is open access publishing. Content's available to anyone. We've all considered these journals. Often their impact factors are slightly lower, and people often ask us, how can I afford to pay that article processing charge? Don't worry, you're in South Africa. Bentham Science has opened all of its content to you free of charge. You can publish in any of their journals with no APC at the moment. So if you've got a paper ready to go, do have a think about whether you'd like to do that in a Bentham Science journal. Traditional journals versus gold open access. Different kinds of journals. Again, we can answer any questions that you may have on this in our Q&A coming up in just a few moments. But let's talk copyright, Scott. Very important in the context of open access publishing.
Indeed, it is. And we'll do this poll in the chat because we don't have a poll set up in the poll system. So feel free to answer in the chat. The question is, what copyrights do you keep when you publish on a preprint server? Do you A, keep all copyrights, B, keep only some of the copyrights, or C, do you give up all copyrights when you publish on a preprint server? Feel free to answer in the chat.
Preprinting is just one other kind of open access publishing. This is, of course, where you put an early stage draft of a research paper onto a platform like Archive, medRxiv, bioRxiv, Research Square, eLife, to name but a few of those fantastic preprint platforms. But what happens to the copyright?
Okay, answers are still coming in hot. Well, this is something that I've learned from you, Gareth. I've learned a lot about preprint servers from you. What is the correct answer here? What copyrights do we actually keep when we publish on a preprint server?
Just as in open access publishing, you, the author, keep all of the copyright. If you do preprint your work or publish it in a full open access journal, you're going to keep all of the copyright. And this is very important because often In traditional journal publishing, so that's where you submit your work to a journal that is not available to everybody. It's behind a paywall, only available to institutional or individual subscribers. Often in this traditional publishing model, the journal or the publisher takes the copyright. And this is something that lots of researchers seemingly are a little bit unaware of. It's really, really important, right, Scott? Where your copyright ends up as a research.
Right. It's a big pain point for authors. It's a question that we often get from authors who actually keeps or who owns the copyrights, and it can actually come up later when it comes to things like the risks of self-plagiarism and so on, which we cover in other events. We won't get into that too deeply today, but it's a big question, and authors have a lot of pain points about it.
Right, so have a think about whether you want to do this. If you've finished a piece of research or you have a conference paper or a conference presentation or even a slide deck from a conference, you may wish to put that onto a preprint platform in order to protect your intellectual property and keep your hands on the copyright. What is a preprint server? It's a place where complete research papers can be shown to the public, to other peers in your field, to other members of your own research community before being published and peer reviewed into a traditional journal. So authors have the copyright, the priority, your work is protected. We get lots of questions about preprint platforms. People ask us, won't my work get stolen if I put my work up onto a preprint platform? No, because you have the copyright. There's a Creative Commons license that's stamped onto the work as well. So you're protected much more if you preprint your work than if you don't preprint your work as a researcher. So have a think about this. Journal editors come in, they select from preprint platforms, they look at preprint platforms, bioRxiv, medRxiv, Research Square, just to give you a few examples. They then come and they select from preprint platforms and look at whether they'd be interested in publishing that particular piece of work. So in addition to pre-submission inquiries as a component of the journal selection process, we do also recommend that you have a look at preprint platforms as well. We've talked about open access publishing. We talked about that in our earlier event as well with our dear colleagues from Bentham from South Africa. Open access publishing ensures that your publication is freely accessible to everyone. So this could include not just the research paper itself, but all of the work, the data, the results, the conclusions, as well as peer review. There are a number of journals using open peer review. There are a number of platforms where you can put your work and get access to early stage peer review. And have a think about how much this has changed over the last decade or so. We would not be through the pandemic, for example, so quickly and efficiently if we had not been seeing lots of research getting pre-printed and out there for the research community to look at immediately prior to peer review. So it can be very important, it can be very useful, it's a very helpful model for publishing. And we talked about this already before, but do have a look at gold open access for your next paper. You won't have to pay as an author in South Africa to do this in one of the Bentham journals. You can get your work automatically published fully gold open access without having to pay any of those article processing charges at the moment. There are other models available, of course. Another way that many funding agencies, many publishers encourage us to put our work out there is by going green with the open access. That's where you might put a late stage accepted draft of your paper online on your own website, on ResearchGate, on academia, for example, putting your work in late stage draft onto one of those platforms and then allowing the final peer-reviewed version to be published in a gated or paywalled journal. So do have a look at this option, these options for publishing as well. And so when it comes to journal selection, as a researcher, we have these 3 helpful rules that you can have a look at. They're more like guidelines really, but do aim high. Do try to publish your research in the best possible journal. This comes with experience, of course, over time, over the course of your career, with help from your supervisor, colleagues, other co-workers and friends. You get better at choosing appropriately. You get better at finding good journals that are appropriate for the work that you've done. And of course, you can't always publish everything in a leading international high impact factor journal. You will get better over time at learning to sell and manage your submission. There are a few tools you can use out there to do this. One that we look at a lot because we both used to work for this company, Edance. They have a tool, they have a journal selector tool that you can have a look at, help you to find a great journal for your next piece of research. So, having all of this in mind as well, of course, do keep in mind that there are more and more fake journals out there, especially thanks to the development of the open access publishing model, where an APC, an article processing charge, is often sought by a publisher or by a journal. This has, of course, led to a rise in the number of fake or predatory journals. Okay, so they'll try to just get money from you. They're getting more and more sophisticated. It can be difficult to spot the difference between a real and a fake journal. Do keep this in mind. Have a look at some of the rules, some of the different ways that we've put together on this slide to help you identify, determine if the journal that you're getting an email from, and we all get loads of emails all of the time from different journals, from different publishers, asking us to make submissions, inviting us to make submissions. How can you spot if that's a potentially fake journal? We'll have a look at the website. Is the journal listed in a reputable index, such as the Directory of Open Access Journals, the DOAJ? Who's on the editorial board? Are the papers in this journal being published regularly? Are the articles being properly peer reviewed? Do they match with the journal aim and scope? And fees should never be charged at submission. You should only ever pay a fee once your paper's been peer reviewed and accepted, right, Scott? Really important for people to be aware of some of these issues.
Indeed, and I've put some resources into the chat for anyone who's interested. First, I put some links to Bentham Open, so you can explore some of the open access journals, the gold open access that Gareth just mentioned. And also I put some resources in the chat for checking for to avoid predatory journals. So thinkchecksubmit.org, and also there's a checklist area that you can download, and also a link to DOAJ. So yeah, I hope those resources help everyone who's selecting a journal out there.
Absolutely. So you can identify that the journal that you've just been emailed by is a real journal by looking at indexes like the Committee on Publication Ethics, like the DOAJ, the Directory of Open Access Journals. Does the journal have a robust peer review process? As is the case with our friends at Bentham. Do have a look at this. Bentham has recently published a blog in the Cabell's blog. Cabell's is the new successor, if you like, to the old Beals list. So do have a look at Cabell's as well. We didn't put Cabell's on this slide, but they are an organization that provides white lists of journals as well as grey lists of journals to avoid. Bentham is noted in that whitelist as a reputable publisher, a place where you can, should, could publish your research, and the fees and policies are fair, clearly listed and explained in detail. So any questions about any of this, we'd be delighted to help, but do have a look at some of these resources as well. Beals list, I mentioned already, is an old list that's been frozen in time now for more than 15 years. This is Jeffrey Beal. He used to work as a librarian at the University of Colorado in Boulder, in Colorado. He created, back almost 20 years ago now, a list of journals that he curated. It's called Beal's List, obviously. He curated this list of journals. It's still widely used by researchers, even though it's very old. And as a recent article published by Bentham in the Cabell's blog will explain, it's not fair as a list of journals out there at the moment. So this list was shut down in 2017, frozen in time since then. So do have a look at it, be aware of it, but look at more recent resources like the DOAJ, like Cabell's, like the Committee on Publication Ethics, in order to have a much clearer idea of your journal choice, and whether that will be a good place for you to put and publish your research. In terms of ethics, we always like to mention this as well in these events. Do not do this. Do not allow ghost or gift authorships on your research papers. Ghost authors are people who do a lot of work writing the paper, but are then not included as authors. Gift authors are where people who do not contribute to the research are nevertheless added as a co-author. So common for younger researchers to have to put their laboratory group head or director or even their PhD supervisor onto their papers. Is it ethical? We would ask that question of everybody listening to this event in terms of authorship, in terms of who did what should you do, where to go in the authorship order. This is something that you should discuss amongst your co-authors before writing the paper. Any questions about what constitutes authorship, how much of a contribution you have to make in order to ethically be an author, have a look at the ICMJE guidelines, the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. They have fantastic guidelines on this, how to be, where to be, who should be an author. So do have a think about this as well as a researcher putting your next research project together, which brings us to the end almost of our event today. We've talked about journal selection before writing your paper, and we've talked about journal selection before submitting your paper. The two elements of journal selection researchers often ask us about. I'll put up this QR code again. Scott, we're going to have a bit of a Q&A now, see how our audience is doing. How are we?
Doing great so far, and I see some comments here in the chat. Uh, Question about, are your journals in South Africa's DHET, Department of Higher Education list? Good question. I don't feel qualified to answer that. Perhaps our colleagues Nadia and Rencha could have an answer for Belinda's question. That's a great question. We do have some other questions coming in. Let me just try to pull these out here. Gareth, this is I know a topic that we talk about with authors all the time. And one question that we often get from authors is, how do I evaluate, how do I self-evaluate my paper to decide if it's appropriate for that journal? And you've published in some very impactful journals yourself, and you provided some information earlier today, but it's one of the top questions we get. How do I know if my paper is appropriate for that selected journal? Do you have any further tips to offer authors who are going through that checklist that we showed, and they're not sure if they feel that their paper is appropriate for the journal they've selected? Any tips
Yeah,
for us?
it's a great question. We get this asked a lot by researchers. Part of it is confidence, of course. Believing in your research, believing that you've done a great piece of research that does deserve to be published in a leading international journal. I would say as well that one of the best tips I was given as a young researcher was to think about the kind of paper that I wanted to write and go and find other examples of papers that are similar
Mhm.
to the one that you wish to write and find them published in decent journals. And then that way you can help yourself with the confidence. Yes, this kind of research has been published before in this journal. This journal has a decent impact factor. I also will write a similar paper and publish it in this journal. So look at where your colleagues, look at where international leaders in your field, researchers that you really like, that you respect, that are leading in your particular field, where are they publishing their research? Have a little bit of a look at their website, go stalk them a little bit online, find out where they're publishing their work. And of course, you can then go with your work to the same journals. Put in your cover letter, X, Y, and Z, recently published in this journal, paper written by A, B, and C. This gives the journal editor additional information as well that your submission will be suitable for their journal. So, yeah, I think that's a fantastic question.
It's a great question. And a related question here from one of our guests is, should early career researchers target different journals than senior researchers? Well, that's a great question.
Um, Yes and no, I would say. I mean, at early career stages, it's often more important for you to get good journal publications. We always do recommend that it's better to publish a few great papers rather than lots of not so great papers, especially at your early career stages, in order to get that good trajectory going. Make sure that you are in kind of competition for jobs and grants and so on. So yeah, I mean it shouldn't be the case that, better, more experienced researchers are publishing in better journals, but this all comes with confidence, as we've talked about before. I mean, having the confidence to submit your work to great journals, leading international journals, is a bit of a double-edged sword because you are more likely to get rejected, right? And the way that we deal with rejection, the way that we handle rejection as researchers is also super important. Take the positives from peer review, take the positives from rejection experiences. If you do get rejected, you can go on, you can build your work up and try another journal that's almost as good.
Interesting. Okay, great question. And thanks, Gareth, for sharing your insights as always. A couple of related questions here, going back to our controversial suggestion to select a journal as early as possible, ideally before writing. One of our guests asks, I guess, two related questions. What if I've already wrote my manuscript? Am I at a disadvantage if I choose a journal now? And a related question is, I've changed my journal selection after writing my manuscript. Can I realistically change the manuscript to fit a different journal now? So I guess similar questions. Well, it's never really too late. There's an ideal time to select a journal, but there isn't necessarily a wrong time to select the journal. But there are some things that we need to keep in mind if we do change our journal selection for an existing paper, aren't there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're not going to be at a disadvantage if you've written the paper already, you have the text ready. I mean, you may have to add or delete text or information or figures or change the formatting, maybe, although that's becoming less and less of an issue these days. And there are many AI tools that you can use to help you to do all of these processes. That indeed is one of our other events. So maybe if you're listening to this and you'd like us to come back, Scott does this. He's an expert on different AI tools for research, writing, and publishing. We could do that in the future. But no, I mean, you've got the paper written. Let's pick a journal. We can shorten it, we can modify it, we can massage it. But no, I wouldn't say that you're at a disadvantage. Just give this technique a go, though. If you have that journal in mind, then use that journal that you've selected as a template for writing your next paper. Scott?
Hmm. Okay, great advice. Thanks, Gareth, for sharing your insights, and thank you for your question. One final question on the topic of journal selection. Our guest asks, um, should I also design my study with a specific journal in mind? Well, that's an interesting question. Going back even farther in the research process, even before writing, is there an advantage to doing that, Gareth, designing the study for a specific journal?
Yes, that's a great question, and there certainly is, because the way that you design your study should be very carefully thought through before you begin your study. And we see lots of researchers who don't do this, send their work to a journal, and then the paper gets rejected because they haven't, for example, done the right ethical groundwork or put in place the right kinds of paperwork, registered the clinical trial before beginning it, for example. So, yeah, I would say a great technique. Have a look at where the kinds of work that you are doing normally get published, which journals. Have a look at what those authors have done, how they've designed their study, how they've done the statistics, how they've put together the ethical statements, the clinical trial registrations, for example, and make sure that you are also fully prepared to begin the study. And so having a journal as a target can really help with a lot of these considerations. So yeah, that's a great question. I would say do that if you can.
Great. Very, very thoughtful question. Thank you for that. And thanks, Gareth, for your answer. I guess we're running out of time here just about, but we might have time for one final question here. Let me see if I can pull a common pain point. Okay, here's a question for you, Gareth. Our guest asks, I'm under pressure to publish, as many are. Should I prioritize fast publication or high impact? Oh, great question. Fast publication or high impact?
Well, it depends on what your outcomes are. It depends what you need as a researcher, what's best for you, I would say. I mean, different institutions, different national governments assess researchers in different ways. So, like, is it better for you to get the paper published quickly and less important for you that that paper comes out in an open access journal or in a journal that's in Scopus Q1 or Q2, for example? Okay, so, for many researchers, it's going to be a bit of a trade-off, quick as possible, but also a decent journal. So this is the balance that many researchers have to strike. It's a big problem. Do we agree with the way that researchers get assessed around the world? Probably not, but we have to play the game, at least for now. So yeah, it's kind of a trade-off, I would say. But my answer to that question, which is a great question, is what's best? What's best for you?
Okay, sound advice. Thanks, Gareth, as always, for sharing your insights as an editor, as an author. And thanks to everyone for joining this event today. On behalf of everyone at WWIS and on behalf of Bentham Science, we really appreciate you making time to join us today. And we hope that Gareth's insights will prove useful and helpful for you. And we'll send out a full recording of today's event tomorrow at this time, and also certificates as a thank you to everyone joining us today. We'll also send you some more information about submitting to Bentham Open under this open access free trial. So look for your inbox to look into your inbox tomorrow for our email, excuse me. And we'll send everything within about 24 hours of the end of this event today. So thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you, Gareth, so much as always for lending your insights.
Brilliant. Great to do these. We love doing these events. Thanks so much, Scott. I've noticed that we have attendees from Zimbabwe, any surrounding countries as well, like neighboring countries to South Africa. We'll make sure we get this Bentham trial extended to include Zimbabwe, Namibia, other countries that you may be joining us from. You will be able to publish your work without an APC in Bentham journals. Thanks very much to Nadia and Rentia for the invitation to do this, and have a great day, Scott. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Gareth, and thanks everyone. Have a great day.